Just gotta yap.
How we usually do that.
I'm Angeliza, and this is What Are You? The podcast about identity, where we're creating space to have honest conversations celebrating all that we are. Hello, everyone, and today I have a really special guest. This one is extra special because this is our first male on the podcast. Everyone, let's give a big welcome to Adam.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, of course. I'm so happy to be here.
Amazing. Adam, do you mind just telling us a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Well, I'm from the Philadelphia suburbs. Go Birds, go Phillies, go Flyers. Not as much Sixers. I grew up in that area. I lived there for 18 years, went to American University, and been in DC or the surrounding area for about my whole adult life. Since then, I'm a big singer. I'm in a Jewish a cappella group, and I'm a big disability advocate and policy wonk. Hashtag disabili-wonk. And I have a great, amazing girlfriend. Shout out Abby. So
Shout out Abby. Abby's pretty cool.
And awesome friends too, like Angeliza.
Thank you. I appreciate you. And yeah, I feel like that's a pretty good summation of who you are, but I am noticing that you did forget one very special someone.
Oh. Yeah, and I of course have my amazing super mutt Zip. His Instagram handle is @zippitydewdog with 2 G's.
Incredible, and we'll make sure to tag Zip in the show notes. But today we're here to talk about just a little piece of who you are, Adam. So Adam and I met via mutual friends and then became friends, and we really bonded over many things: music, sports, and then ADHD and our coping mechanisms. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about that today.
Yeah.
Which leads me to Adam. What are you?
I am a person with multiple disabilities, neurodivergent, and passionate disabili-wonk.
Amazing. So let's deep this. Tell me more. What are your disabilities? What has your disability journey been? Why is this something that you feel is such an important, notable facet of your identity?
Yeah, I think it all stems from my upbringing and my childhood with multiple disabilities, Tourette syndrome, ADHD, combined type, a mood disorder not otherwise specified, generalized anxiety disorder, processing speed delay, and just general quirkiness, which isn't a disability, but just, me. And it's been a really important facet of my identity because growing up was not easy on me or my family. I was very fortunate to have parents who knew how to advocate for me and had the resources to advocate for me. And so growing up, I had the people around me that I needed. And then eventually when I was more an adolescent or a teen, I started thinking about what I wanted to do in life. And I realized I wanted to help others. Specifically, I kind of honed in on disability advocacy and advocating for people with disabilities like myself who could not or did not have the resources to advocate for themselves. And that led to a lot of advocacy, and now I've been doing it professionally for as long as I can remember. I Yeah, it's kind of my whole thing.
which is amazing. And thank you so much for all of that. That was a fairly consolidated summation of your journey from
Yeah.
your beginnings. But I do want to kind of break it apart a little bit, the
Mhm.
pieces of your journey. So you told us about your diagnoses. How old were you when you were diagnosed with each of those different, well, for lack of a better word, we'll just call them disabilities?
I do prefer disabilities, but everyone's language is different, right? So I was in second grade when I was diagnosed with ADHD and Tourette syndrome in that order. I don't really remember when I was diagnosed with anxiety and mood disorder, but those ADHD and Tourette syndrome diagnoses were really pretty integral in my journey because yeah, up to that point we didn't really know a whole lot about what was going on with me. When I was in class, in school, I would be under the table barking and like, you know, making noises and generally ticking. Which at the time we didn't know was ticking and was uncontrollable. But after about, I mean, more than 10 different doctors and specialists that we saw to figure out what it was. Uh, all kinds of doctors. We eventually found Dr. Anthony Rothstein. Shout out to him. And immediately when my parents described my symptoms, he was like, "Oh, those are tics. That is Tourette syndrome." And so in second grade, my parents set up a series of assemblies for my elementary school that was through the Pennsylvania Tourette Syndrome Alliance that were like educational assemblies for each grade about Tourette syndrome. And I spoke, and someone from PATSA spoke too. And that was a pretty integral point in my journey. And every year, my parents and I would go to Harrisburg to advocate for funding of Tourette syndrome in Pennsylvania, which basically was PATSA. Um, and fast forward to high school, I became their first youth board representative. And then I was on the board for several years after I turned 18. And I was actually their vice president of the board for a while. That's all to say, from a very young age, I was involved in this organization that really gave me a voice, or at least gave me a platform to take control of my disability, at least one of them, and do good.
That is amazing. And I think you're absolutely right. That's not necessarily an avenue many people have to take, or everybody who experiences these disabilities has to take. So that's so wonderful that your parents were just so supportive in providing that resource and that
Yeah,
education for your peers. I wish
yeah.
I had that when I was in school.
Actually, on that point, my school district, they did their best, but we did end up needing to sue them uh, for for not providing me with my free appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. I got placed in a different school starting in 4th grade because they could accommodate my needs better.
And was that different school a part of the same school district, or was that
No, it was a
school?
private school
Oh,
for
wow.
kids with disabilities.
So when you sued the school district, what was the outcome?
I mean, it was a whole process. My parents were really great in how they documented the school district's failure to accommodate me and meet my needs. and we settled. The settlement was basically them paying for the cost of my schooling at this private school that could meet my needs better, and the transporting me there.
Wow. Have you watched the show on Peacock called All Her Fault?
I started it.
I'm not sure if you got to this part, but one of the characters has a son who experiences a lot of disabilities. And a plot point of the show is the character is trying to figure out a way to get his son into a lottery based school that can accommodate his disabilities and his needs. What were your needs? Do you mind going into what those accommodations were and why you needed them?
I'm not. I don't remember a whole lot from like like uh, from my childhood from the first person point of view. Um, I definitely needed extra time. I needed alternative ways of like learning. I have a fine motor delay, so writing for me was really hard. And in 2005 to 7, like computers were barely a thing, or at least in my school. Uh, it was mostly writing, like by hand. Uh, I also needed breaks. Since senior year of high school, I've taken 70 milligrams of Vyvanse, which is the highest possible dose. And
What is
uh,
Vyvanse? Do you
sorry,
mind just
it's a
elaborating?
stimulant. It's a
Okay.
ADHD medicine. The Vyvanse just gets me to a baseline of being attentive and focused, and I have strategies that I have to use and coping mechanisms to stay focused and manage my energy levels, like my mental energy levels, because it is absolutely exhausting to have ADHD.
Well,
like
I want to get into that a little bit, but before I do, I'm gonna ask you to break down some of what your disabilities are, what they mean, because I know you and I communicate about a lot of symptoms of neurodivergent conditions in a sort of shorthand, but I know that what we talk about and what we send each other memes about on Instagram is not necessarily common knowledge. I didn't know about a lot of the things that we reference and that you've already referenced before I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 27. But before we get there, you did mention that you don't remember a lot of your childhood from the first person point of view. Why is that?
I I'm not sure. My memory is not great. It could be a trauma response to just the way that my childhood was, but yeah, I mean, I'm honestly not sure why. I've tried to probe it a lot, and there are times when I have little flashes of it, but it's kind of a blur.
That is really interesting. Do you think that it's a trauma response to your childhood in regard to your disabilities or just in regard to other elements of your childhood?
I no, it definitely my disabilities, and I I mean, there were some times that my family went through it. I won't get into like super specifics, but my uh there were some challenges. Like we I had some behavioral challenges that took a toll on, and mental health challenges that took a toll on my family and my siblings and me. And I mean, you know, I had to go to boarding school at one point, residential treatment center, because I I couldn't cope. My self-regulation was just, or my regulation of my emotions and the coping mechanisms that I needed to kind of get through the day were just not there. And I I was at a boarding school or one boarding school for 2 years and then another for 1 year, and before I came home. But like during that, I mean, that time saved my life. Like I learned so many kind of what different coping mechanisms that I could use to function and kind of uh, keep my like keep myself in check while also being true to myself, and I basically learned how to function in society, uh, which yeah, and that was a hard.
I'm so glad to hear that your boarding school experience and your time in that residential treatment facility was so positive. I was actually recently listening to another podcast that is amazing, called Dead Certain. They talk a lot about a boarding school that one of the murder suspects was sent to as a sort of behavioral treatment program. And the abuse that those students suffered at the hands of that school is
Mhm.
horrific. It was so heartbreaking to listen to, but it is also so good to hear on the flip side that
Yeah,
there has been
yeah.
progress in that space. Is that universal progress,
Well,
would you say? Okay.
I would say my parents did a lot of research on the boarding schools that we looked at. It was a process, and and the I mean, the boarding school we decided on was great in that it it they really incorporated the family in a way that doesn't lend itself uh to that kind of abuse, and like like they, as a requirement for attending that residential treatment center, the family has to be on board and has to be uh you can't just ship your son or daughter off there. It's not like that. It's not. And I, I feel for so many of those families that entrust their child onto these schools, and to get better, to be able to function in society. And then honestly, it's so hard. It's both heartbreaking and infuriating. And and no matter how hard it is to for the staff there, or no matter what, it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't. There's never an excuse for uh, treating people abusively, or um, I mean, it's so counterproductive. It's so counterproductive.
Let's go back. So
Mhm.
let's bring it back to the beginning. Let's talk about your different diagnoses.
I want to preface all of this by saying I noticed in the past, especially around COVID, that there was a proliferation of accounts that were kind of capitalizing on things that maybe they're symptoms of ADHD, but but basically making everyone think they have ADHD. And if you think you have ADHD, go to a doctor. I mean, obviously, not doctor access to a doctor is not necessarily easy, but especially in our system. But do your best. Like, don't self-diagnose. ADHD is a neurological disorder that uh, that relates to your focus. So there's inattentive type, and then there's hyperactive type. So it's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And I have combined type. So I can both be very inattentive and hyperactive. Uh, what that means is when I'm in a group setting, I have a really hard time focusing. Kind of, I either space out or I bounce from conversation to conversation, or I am just silly and kind of bounce like I I feed I feed on the external energy and the vibe. Uh and so like for that reason I love being around my friends. I used to like love being at bars and in like a crowded environment. Not to drink, but just to like be around people and like take in the energy and the vibe and let my dopamine receptors just like go crazy. Yeah, so that's one thing, right? My uh my focus in group settings, the way that my energy matches the vibe and my surroundings, and I am pretty sensitive to my environment, to my external environment. Um, I'm also very susceptible to like drained mental energy because it takes so much effort to focus and stay on task. By the end of the day, I am just exhausted. And I'm not talking about like how everyone might be exhausted at the end of the day. I'm talking about I can't go to happy hour. I need a nap. I need a nap after work. I need to go right home, lay in my bed, and nap. And that is that. Like, I just need a nap. My energy just zapped.
How does that make you feel? Not to be clinical, but
I was
do you
about to
feel,
say,
have you ever felt like maybe if you can't go to happy hour, that impacts your quality of life? Or is it pretty easy for you to accept, oh, this is just a part of me? Because if I do try to push through, then I will suffer on the flip side.
I've come to terms with that. Like, I need to kind of force myself to have that recharge time, or decompression time. Like nowadays, I'm just like, I don't mind. Like, but when I was like earlier in my 20s, I would get home from work or get done work, nap, and then later on I would be like, okay, I'm ready to go. I want to go, 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 go. And living in Adams Morgan or a surrounding area in DC is like I would just go to Madam's Organ, which is an amazing live music venue bar. It's I was a regular there for several years. That's the best example of it. I would go alone. I would just go and like chill and be with the music.
And I do have a question about this sort of taking in the vibes and feeding off the vibes. Would you identify yourself as an extrovert by chance?
Yes, I
So,
would.
would you attribute that sort of vibe feeding, recharging through energy around you? Would you attribute that to your ADHD more specifically than you would to your extroversion?
I think it kind of goes in tandem with it. Uh, you know, everyone with ADHD isn't an extrovert. Uh, but the fact that I am an extrovert, it just means that when when I when my energy is zapped, one of the ways I recharge is through being around a lot of people and in an environment with a lot of stimuli.
That makes sense to me. I mean, two things can be true. You can
Yeah,
recharge through rest and you can recharge through people. I mean, there doesn't need to be a binary
yeah,
answer one way or the
exactly.
other. I ask that because I don't identify as an extrovert. I identify as an introvert. I do enjoy being around people and I do enjoy meeting people and obviously speaking with people. But is that where I get my energy? No, I do need, and I've learned this about myself over many, many, many years, but I do need that time to decompress, to recharge alone or in a very small group. And without that, I drain an empty battery constantly. The way you describe ADHD reminds me of the way that ADHD was always described to us when I was in elementary school. It was
Hmm.
always that boy doing that crazy wacky
Hmm.
thing over in the corner, running around, being loud, yelling, being silly.
That was me.
Yeah, but that was not me.
It was not
Was
you, I'm sure.
not at all. When I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 27, I was told that I had exhibited very strong symptoms of ADHD my whole life. I had developed sort of my own coping mechanisms
Hmm.
for myself to function. And I mean, part of why I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until I was 27 was because I was a high performer. I always got great grades. I did every single activity under the sun. I was
Yeah.
good, well behaved
Hmm.
in school and in my extracurriculars. And I always tried to do the right thing. Um, Also, I can focus. I do have an attentive ADHD versus hyperactive, but my focus is so intense that what I am inattentive to is my physical needs, my biological needs. So, for example,
Hmm.
I can sit and work on a project for 10 hours straight, no
Hmm.
stopping, totally
Yeah.
forgetting I need to eat. I need to go to the bathroom. I need to do this chore and that chore and that chore.
Hmm.
And then when I come out of that sort of hyper focus, that hypnosis, I realize, oh snap, I didn't do everything else. And then
Yeah.
that was my cycle every day. Sometimes it still is. I've worked really hard on breaking some of those mental habits, but that was my cycle every day. I would get to the end of the day and beat myself up because I would realize everything else I forgot or wasn't paying attention to because I was so hyper focused. So, in terms of hyperactivity, I have like tics. Um, my fiance and I call them artisms. He always has to have
Hmm.
like a pop pop
Hmm.
thing when he
Yeah.
watches TV. He always needs to be doing something with his hands. My feet cannot stay still. And
Yeah.
for your legs, always
My
hands.
legs constantly shaking. Yeah.
That's how I feel
Hmm.
stable and solid and centered and grounded. So, it's interesting how different the ADHD experiences can be. I also take
Yeah.
a stimulant, I take Adderall, but it took me years to get to a place where I felt comfortable because I started with a different stimulant and it was a horrible, horrible, horrible experience.
Yeah. On the topic of medicine, oh my God. The different iterations that my like medicine regimen took throughout my childhood, insane.
Yeah,
Absolutely insane. Now I've taken pretty much the same cocktail since senior year of high school, basically, and just like with some adjustments in terms of dosage. But like it stabilizes me, and then I use my other coping mechanisms to kind of even it all out.
so, on that topic, what are your other coping mechanisms for this or any of your other disabilities? And I'm sure there's overlap. Is that right?
Yeah,
Or
I don't have the statistics, but most people with Tourette syndrome have some kind of co-occurring disorder. Uh, Most common, I think, is ADHD and OCD. I don't have OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. My coping mechanisms tend to be in my decompression time and like keeping myself busy and kind of the structure of my day. I've learned at work how to be very, very organized. I It took a lot of time and effort, and it still takes a lot of time and effort. It's really interesting. I'm like pretty type A, I would say, in my work life, in that I'm very productive and I know how to be productive and I know how to be kind of the uh, model worker and like and that kind of organization in my work. But then I get home and like I need to put away my laundry and it sits for days. Um,
I can
and
relate to all of that
God,
so deeply. I am so good at work. I was
I
so good at school.
I actually wasn't good at school. I had a hard time with school because of the grades and the requirements and like the tests and all the uh, all the things that go with like having to focus for however many hours a day in classes and having to then somehow structure myself and my day to get my assignments and my readings done and focusing on reading, right? Oh my god. Reading and focus to read is like it's so hard. I love reading. Don't get me wrong. I love reading. And I'm an avid reader. But keeping my focus on a book really requires me to be interested in that content. But that wasn't always the case when I was in school. Yeah, school was really hard. But I was an A and B student, and I had accommodations that leveled the playing field. I had double time on tests involving math or writing, but one and a half on the other, and I can't remember which one was which. Um, my college accommodations are easier to remember, so I had extra time. I like could use my computer for notes. Like that was a requirement for me, even when, you know, like when there were policies against that. I had like this like a note, it was a notepad that had like a pen that where the pen would record, and then the notes that I wrote like on the pad would correspond to the audio. A live scribe pen. It was really helpful in like when I would need to go back, and I wasn't good at taking notes and listening to the lecture or whatever it was. I basically it was easier for me to just focus on the lecture and not have to worry about taking those notes, because I couldn't split that focus.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I feel similarly. I did take a lot of notes, but in my taking notes, I had a hard time prioritizing information. Let's talk about what a processing delay looks like and in the context
Yeah.
of your ADHD and your other disabilities.
There are a few ways that it manifests. One is when you're talking to me and you're asking me a question, and it's like a complex question, let's say, that requires a complex answer. I need some time. Even some simpler questions or things, like it's sometimes I have a really hard time getting my words out. Sometimes I know exactly what I want to say, and like like organizing my thoughts and then structuring them in a way that makes sense and is coherent, a lot of times takes a lot of effort for me, and it can be kind of slow. So
What is the delay there? Is that a delay of processing from your brain to literally your mouth and your resonators?
it's more of the organization in my mind
Got it.
and then translating that to my mind.
Got it.
So
I
I guess kind of both a little bit.
Okay. No, that's fair. I When I get nervous or I'm in a situation where I'm not entirely at ease, I can also have those moments because I'm sort of internally frazzled. I need to take that time as well to organize my words, organize my thoughts if I feel
Yeah.
that pressure. But it's only in social settings, I feel like. I don't feel like
Hmm.
it's in a work setting quite as much, at least.
Yeah. I've gotten a lot better at it in work settings. Like when I know what I'm talking about and like I know my talking points, forget about it. Like when I'm talking about disability things, forget about it. Um, but when it's more complex stuff that doesn't have like a set answer, it's more spontaneous, that can be kind of hard.
That's fair. Let's talk about Tourette's. What
Yeah.
exactly are the symptoms of Tourette's?
Yeah. So one, a tic can be anything. A tic is a uncontrollable movement or sound. Tics wax and wane. So you might have a tic one week and then a different tic the next week, or
Interesting.
they can morph into different versions of themselves. Um, there are motor tics, which are motor, so it's movements. There can be simple or complex motor tics. Simple is like involving one kind of body part or movement, and then complex can be like a pattern or a set of movements. Uh, then there's like vocal tics, which are uh, sounds or vocalizations or words. The simple vocal tics can be like a or a like kind of a just one kind of simple sound. Um, a a complex vocal tic can be like a set, similar to what I said about simple and complex motor tics. Um, I have a lot of vocal tics, whistling, which a lot of times manifests itself in whistling tunes like songs, and just like a constant kind of low murmur of sound, or humming, or I a fire siren. If I'm like in a very kind of hyper excited mood or excitable, um, a lot of times in the morning, is when my tics will be. It's really that uncontrollable aspect
Mm-hmm.
of it is the kind of important part. Also, some people, including me, um, the some people can suppress their tics, but it's not natural and it takes a
What does that
lot of
feel like?
energy,
Uh-huh.
and eventually it has to come out. And in that sense, but like
Yeah.
you'll feel it on the tail end. Asking someone who has Tourette and is ticking, or can you stop, or can you try to stop, or like, it's a no go. It's not okay.
What does it feel like when you try to suppress it? Is it like holding back a sneeze?
Yeah, like holding back a sneeze, trying not to blink. Actually, holding back a sneeze is a really good example. Yeah, I guess it depends on the person too.
You said that you can suppress your tics. Is that
Sometimes,
something you've learned, or is it just something that you've discovered about yourself?
um, I think it depends on the situation. As an adult, you there are, society does not always accept, even if you wanted to, even if it should. Society does not always accept the kind of disruptive nature of some tics, and it's kind of been a learned masking by
Can you explain
necessity.
can you explain what masking is?
Yeah, so it's basically putting on a mask of your symptoms of, or your true self in your neurodivergent self. So what other people might consider weird or out of unusual or out of the ordinary, you suppress that because it's not socially acceptable, or whatever, for whatever reason.
Well, thank you for
Because
that. That was
yeah,
a good explainer of Tourette's. Have we exhausted all of your diagnoses? We got ADHD.
we didn't really do anxiety. Mine is generalized anxiety disorder, and that manifests itself in a lot of different ways. I generally am a worrier, and
Also a worrier.
yeah,
I
like
identify as
but
such.
it's more than just like worrying, like typical kind of everyday worrying. It's like worrying that is at an intensity and a uh sometimes irrational. I mean, when I was younger, it was oftentimes irrational. One example of a kind of strain of my anxiety was back in the day in childhood. There was a corner store, McKinley Market. One of the things I worried about was that someone, and trigger warning here, violence, someone like a robber would come into the store and hold it up at gunpoint while I was in there. And the chance of that happening in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania, I mean, I don't know the crime statistics, but not a big crime area. Um, but I was terrified, or of my loved ones or my friends going somewhere and getting robbed, or
Did
kind
you
of
see like
that.
a movie where someone got robbed or
No,
something?
no, I didn't. I don't know. It was some, and I to this day I worry about like I catastrophize is really the word for it. Uh,
Like spiral, if you will.
or spiral. Um,
Learning about anxiety and the existence of a quote unquote
hmm.
anxiety disorder for me was something that was hugely helpful
Oh yeah,
because before I learned that there was a diagnosis for a condition called anxiety, I just thought I was just crazy
crazy. Yeah.
and
No,
loopy. And why
my
am I
mom
crying about things that aren't happening?
my mom has dealt with anxiety her whole life, and my mom is the best. Like, she knows exactly what to do depending on the situation of like what I'm anxious about. She just knows. And I mean, she's 61 years old, so wisdom, right? But like, oh my God, having that person who understands is a game changer.
That is beautiful. And that's so amazing for you.
Privilege. It
It is a
really
privilege.
is.
Yeah, but I mean, that is, I mean, that's invaluable. That's a tool, that's a
Yeah.
privilege, that's everything. To kind of tie a little bow on this conversation about everything disability related, how does being someone with disabilities make you feel just in general?
Yeah, so I've always felt that my disabilities make like all of me and what makes me me includes my disabilities. And we talked about a lot of the negative some of the negatives about ADHD and neurodivergence, but oh my God, like the creativity and the different ways that your brain works, like the way that my brain works is actually so fascinating to me, and I actually take a lot of pride in it. I mean, most of my disabilities are like in the brain, right? Or in the mind. And that makes me feel just fascinated and like I have a more interesting life than a lot of neurotypicals. Um, and that's not to say it's neurotypicals are bad. It just gives my life a little more pizzazz.
A little more sparkle.
Yeah, sparkle.
The way that you framed your love and wholehearted acceptance of who you are and your disabilities. I just found that very beautiful and very
Hmm.
inspiring as somebody who I'm not
Yeah,
quite to where you are yet. I mean, it's not a linear journey,
yeah.
but
No, it's not. Yeah.
I have times where I'm like, wow, amazing. And I can grow and I can know myself more and better than I did when I was 26. When I was 25, I can live a more mindful and just more full life with this
Hmm.
knowledge, with this diagnosis. However, I do get into patterns of beating myself up, but
Yeah.
I also the same time, I do feel like it gives me a lot of space to forgive myself that I didn't feel like I ever had prior to being diagnosed because I didn't know.
When I grow up, I'm gonna be Batman. When I grow up, I'm gonna be Britney Spears.
So, we're coming into our last segment. So, normally, I would have asked you to tell me more about advocacy and what an advocate is a little earlier. However, you told us at the beginning that what you wanted to be when you grow up is a disability advocate. So, tell me about what an advocate is and why did you decide you wanted to be an advocate?
Well, an advocate is it's someone who does isn't just thinking about themselves. Someone who pushes for something in society to be better, to make progress on some aspect of our lives. Because I had the ideal growing up, I wanted to use that privilege to make that progress for others who do not or did not have that privilege of having the advocate and the village to get through the hard times and build resilience. And uh, so that's a huge reason why I wanted to be an advocate.
I love that. And you mentioned earlier in the episode that your parents were such strong advocates for you in your life and in your journey navigating a life with these disabilities. What how did you learn that what they did for you could be a career, could be a job, could be something that it goes beyond what they did for you personally, and you could do that for someone or many someones beyond yourself?
I I mean, from high school on, I I positioned myself one to be to in different programs and internships, uh making connections and like being involved in advocacy work um for different organizations. I you know Networking was a huge part of it, uh which is such a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. uh you know Making those connections with other disability advocates, and it really I definitely followed a track that led me to I you know I my my previous job, before my current one, was in the Office of Disability Employment Policy at the U.S. Department of Labor. And that was like that when I got that job, that was my dream job. I was a policy advisor. I was doing disability policy systems change work. I wanted to be there my whole career. And the way I got there was by making myself known and positioning myself throughout college to I had an internship from a connection that I got through a connection, um that led to this, this me having a better chance of getting this internship. And then from there, I learned about, you know, this other internship program that then I was able to get into, and it was a very well known one. And from there, that kind of branched out, and I was still involved in the organization that I interned with, uh, and like it's all very like spider web, like different branches or tree branches of my. I have a huge network. Is
That's
basically what
amazing.
I'm saying, and that was the an integral part of it.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. Would you say that other employees at ODAP were also disabled?
There's a big population of that,
Amazing.
big
Well, do you feel
percentage.
like that having that experience makes you a stronger advocate, or having some sort of connection to somebody who does experience disability in some capacity makes you a stronger advocate? Or do you think
I mean,
it's just,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
Was there anything else that you ever wanted to be when you grew up? Like, did you want to be a dinosaur or an astronaut at any point?
There was a point when I wanted to be a psychologist or therapist, like something like that. Um, then I realized I wanted to make like a difference on a more macro level than a therapy or a psychology setting.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Last question before I let you go live your life. What is your most exciting tick?
The fire siren.
And why is that so exciting?
It's just so realistic, and it makes my dog Zip uh howl
Ah, because he
um
thinks you're a fire truck.
because he thinks I'm a fire truck. It
Incredible.
helps when there's actually a fire truck going by
Mm,
and I do it and he will howl. But yeah, it's very
incredible.
cute.
Adam, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I know we talked long, we talked hard, and I know that you decompressed before this, but you probably need to decompress again.
I'm happy. Thank you for having me.
And I'd love to have you back on to talk about your hyperfixation in a later
Yeah,
episode.
cool.
Thank you. What Are You is a one-woman production by me, Angel Lisa. Our theme song is Pickin' Our Dreams by Hector Secaria. If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow us on Instagram at whatareyu_pod and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Questions? Want to be on the show? Email at hello@justgottayap.com. Thanks for listening.
Just gotta yap.
How would you usually do that?